Manila hit me like a brick the moment I stepped out onto the streets. It's loud, it's chaotic, it's in your face. And in this video, I'll let you know my thoughts on my first impressions of this fascinating capital city. Let's get into it. All right, so point number one, and this is meant to be more of a bullet point video. And as you're flying into Manila, it's definitely a bit of a contrasting type of experience. As you're coming in over the ocean, you're seeing mountains around Manila. It's very green, very beautiful. It kind of looks like Hawaii. And then when you get closer to Manila, it's just a giant city. And it can look a bit slummy in parts, especially as you're going over the river. You can kind of see trash and a bit of a kind of like a shanty town vibe to it. Now, not all of Manila is like this. It's just that's kind of like one thing that's very evident as you're flying over. It's just kind of a contrasting type of experience as you're landing in Manila. So once you've landed and you're in the airport, I would say the airport's not great. It's not terrible. It's not the best first impression. You'd think for like a large capital city, it would have a nicer airport. But it is functional though, and it's just a bit kind of outdated, and the terminals are not connected all that well. So it's not the best experience, but it's not terrible. It's definitely functional for what it is. It's just if you're coming from a place like, say, Vancouver, like their airport's almost like a museum. Like it's super nice. Manila's it's just kind of dingy, but a bit outdated and not the greatest, if I'm being honest. But it is functional for what it is. If you're transferring there domestically, it's totally fine. I personally despise leaving Manila. I find the departure part of the airport is just a bit of a mess. I'm not trying to be offensive, but if you just Google Manila's airport, it has terrible ratings. I would recommend if you are leaving from Manila, get there very early because the traffic can be horrendous and not the best experience leaving Manila. But I wouldn't let the airport change your plans from coming to Manila. It is a fantastic country. It's just the airport could use some work. And one last thing about the Manila airport. I was there in mid-January of this year, and they were still celebrating Christmas. I thought it was kind of funny, but I guess they celebrate Christmas from like September until the end of January. So that's one thing that I found a bit unusual. But it was good though. I love Christmas. I just found it a little bit quirky that there was Christmas decorations in the airport in mid-January. The next point many travelers will probably experience when they get to the Philippines is just massive jet lag. Where the country is positioned, it's a long flight for a lot of people coming from North America or Europe. And I think Manila loses out to other destinations like Tokyo, Shanghai, Taipei. It's not the most connected airport. And odds are for many travelers, you'll have to take a few connections. Now, I'll give you a good story. In 2024, I was being a bit cheap, and I live in Calgary, Canada. I flew Calgary to Dallas, Dallas to Tokyo, Tokyo to Manila. It was like a 35-hour flight, and you just have massive jet lag when you arrive there. And a good tip is you want to actually time your arrival where you get to your hotel, maybe shower, eat in the evening time. That way you can go to sleep right away and avoid jet lag. On this massive trip, I actually landed like 5 in the morning. And I made the mistake of taking a nap. And the next thing you know, it's like 8 hours later and your schedule is totally messed up. So it is a long flight for many people and there's usually lots of connections, but try to time it so that you get to your destination around like the early evening, like 7 or 8 p.m. That way you can get settled, you can shower, eat, get organized and then go to sleep. This helps prevent jet lag for many people. This is just one tip that I found works quite well. So once you're out of the airport, you get to your hotel and you're settled and you start walking around Manila. My first impression, it was kind of like a sensory overload. So it's super hot and humid. Like I'm Canadian, so it gets hot here like a month or two out of the year. I come from a very dry climate, so the humidity obviously hit me right away. I'm not used to that. And the next thing I noticed is just the insane numbers of people. Metro Manila is one of the largest metro areas in the entire world. I think there's more people in that area than all of Canada combined. I come from Calgary, Canada, about 1.5 million people, but they're super spread out. In Manila, it's kind of a smaller city and inland area, but there's just an insane number of people in a small, packed area. So there's just people all over the place. The traffic is nuts. It's just kind of like a sensory overload walking around Manila for the first time. The next thing I want to talk about is transportation in the Philippines. And the first thing I noticed is the jeepney. These are old World War II era Jeeps that were left behind, and they've been converted into like taxis and buses. And they're all kind of custom. They've got crazy designs. They're very bright. They're very flashy. And they're dirt cheap as well. If you want to travel around on a budget, definitely check out the jeepneys. Now, I've taken jeepneys quite a few times, but at first they can be very intimidating because you're not quite sure where they're going or the route or how it all operates. But I definitely ask for some help. Filipinos are super friendly and most of them speak English. And it's definitely a very cheap way to get around the city as well. And the last point on transportation, it is a country of mountains and islands, so it can be difficult to get around. On a single trip, you could be taking a flight, a regular taxi, a tricycle, a jeepney, a scooter, and even a ferry. So it can be a bit of a challenge. It is, planes, trains, automobiles, and ferries. It's kind of fun though. And I find transportation there is not all that expensive. It's definitely reasonable, especially if you're comparing it to places like in Canada or the USA. So the logistics of getting around the Philippines can be a bit challenging, but that makes it kind of fun as well, though. And one last thing about transportation, if you want to travel like a local in Manila, definitely take the LRT and the MRT. I lived on Taft Avenue by De La Salle School. That's where I was going to school at the time. And I was about a block away from the Taft station, so I took it all the time. I never had any issues whatsoever on the LRT, and I connected to the MRT. I went all over the city, never any issues whatsoever. But it can be a bit of an eye-opener being on these trains. They can get like jam-packed. And when it gets super packed, like you are literally like 1 inch from someone else. So when it got that packed, I would just put my hand in my pocket and hold my keys in my wallet and just hold on with one hand. Never any issues, but it is a huge city, and I'm sure pickpocketing can happen. And one thing I like about their train system there is you actually pay by the destination, not just like an overall ticket price like where I live in Calgary. So if you're really going like one station, the actual price is cheaper versus going like 6 or 7 stops. So I like that about it. And one thing I found kind of interesting about their system, it's very old-fashioned in that you have to actually deal with a person when you're paying for your ticket versus using an electronic machine. So it's kind of old school that way. And you can see some unusual things around these stations. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you can actually see like homeless children walking around stations like the EDSA station, which you won't see in places like Canada. So for me, this was a bit of a real eye-opener. It is kind of sad, but this is the reality in parts of Manila. And the next point, so once you're settled, you're kind of wondering what to do in Manila. This is kind of what I thought about the city. And before I went to the Philippines, I had been all over Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia. So I had some experience in Southeast Asia. And my first impression of Manila is that it didn't have a lot of like the tourist sites that places like Bangkok had. So Bangkok has like all sorts of crazy fun things to do, lots of really nice tourist attractions. It really is like a international kind of city. Manila's not so much like that. My impression of Manila is that it's a bit more of an experience to be there versus a place where you have to see like these certain tourist sites. Like in Bangkok, they have like the Khao San Road and the temples and stuff like that. Manila's not quite like that, where you have like a week there to see a whole bunch of tourist attractions. Not quite like that. It's a bit more of like a fun place to visit and a bit more of an experience versus just like going to places to take pictures. Like it just doesn't have like the Khao San Road area of Bangkok or like that international party vibe. It's just a bit different. It's not worse. It's just a bit of a different kind of atmosphere than places like Bangkok. And the next point, English. Now I come from Western Canada, so English is my first language. It made it so much easier for me to travel in the Philippines versus other places in Southeast Asia. I can recall being in Thailand and like pointing at a menu and just like picking something that I didn't really know what it was. Not the case in the Philippines. Pretty much everyone speaks English to a decent level. So it's very easy to get around. It's easier to talk to cab drivers, restaurant and hotel workers. It just makes it so much easier. And there's even some Spanish remnants in the country, which are also kind of familiar to me. So I just found it so much easier to get around compared to other places in Southeast Asia. And that made it, a fun place to visit. Now, one thing that I enjoyed about the Philippines is that they don't barter nearly as much as other places in Southeast Asia. For example, in Thailand, you could be talking to a tuk-tuk driver and he'll give you like a price that's like 10 times what it should be. You have to go back and forth and kind of barter with them. Then he'll take you to somewhere else that you're actually not even planning to go to. Like he'll take you to like a diamond store or like a suit shop on the way to your destination. They do stuff like that in Thailand, which I didn't care for. But in the Philippines, they don't really do that. I do recommend asking a cab driver to turn the meter on if possible, or negotiating the fare in advance. That's still fairly common. But other than that, I found the prices in the Philippines were pretty much the prices. You didn't have to go back and forth and barter for everything. Now, I hate bartering, so I found this like a good surprise. And next up, so once you're in the Philippines and you're dealing with the people, you will quickly realize how nice they are. They are good people. They're funny, they're hardworking, and they'll go out of their way to help you. They're just very warm people, and they're very polite as well. People call you sir and ma'am, And people say Canadians are very polite, but I think the Filipinos are right up there. And I think this is why Canadians and Filipinos get along so well. I think they're just very nice people. And you'll get tons of attention in the Philippines. I can recall being here in 2007. In those days, the country wasn't nearly as touristy as it is today. I think the past, 5 years or so, it's become a very hot spot for international tourists, and things have changed a little bit. But in 2007, a tall white guy walking around Manila was a bit unusual. And I get like random people on the streets like talking to me. Restaurant and bar staff would be flagging me down to come into their establishment. I'd have women approach me in the streets, like asking for my number. It was just very unusual. You don't really see that in Canada. So I had to catch myself a little bit because it was highly unusual for me to have this kind of experience. And I could be like in the provinces walking past someone's house, and there could be like a karaoke party going on, and the family could be asking me to come join them. Like, this is very common. So I just wasn't used to this kind of attention, which was kind of fun though. And the next point is the rich and poor divide. Now, every city, every country has its issues. There's definitely a bit of a gap between the rich and the poor in Manila. It's just very evident walking around. But despite that, the people are still super friendly. They're very accommodating. I didn't have any issues with my safety or anything at all. I just found the people were super nice. And don't be labeling the entire city as poor. Like, there's definitely rich parts of Manila. And I went to De La Salle University, and most of my classmates came from like really rich backgrounds. So there's definitely rich, and there's definitely lots of poor in Manila as well. And I just found the gap between them was a bit more evident than places like, say, Calgary, Canada. And next up is infrastructure. This is very evident if it's your first time in Southeast Asia. This is not just a Manila or a Philippines problem. This is kind of all over Southeast Asia from what I've seen. In that I'm comparing the Philippines to where I live in Canada. I'm lucky to live in Calgary, Canada. It's a clean, modern, safe city with excellent infrastructure. That's not the case in many parts of Southeast Asia. You could be walking on the road, the sewer grate could be missing. You could be walking over plumbing pipes, like the electrical wires, like a jumbled mess sometimes. Sometimes the sidewalks are uneven. You're walking over things. There could be no sidewalk, you'd be walking on the roads. It's just not as user-friendly as in Canada. Again, it's part of the excitement. It's just a bit of a culture shock, but I find that the infrastructure is a bit lacking in parts of Southeast Asia. One of the weird quirks about the Philippines that I've noticed is that they're a real mall culture. They love shopping malls, just humongous malls. Some of the biggest malls I've seen in my life were located in Manila. Like the Mall of Asia is fantastic, and they seem to be all over the place. Huge, monstrous malls, and their culture, they just love to go to them for some reason. I just find it a bit fascinating. One of those weird, quirky things about the Philippines. And the next point, let's talk about food. And one thing that I noticed right away is that Filipinos love fast food. There's a huge variety of fast food chains all over the country. And it can be a bit unusual going to a KFC and seeing spaghetti on the menu, which you don't really see in North America. So I thought that was kind of cool. I also noticed that going to McDonald's was kind of like an upper class thing to do, which in Canada is not so much the case. That was kind of unusual. The food itself, it gets a bad rap, to be honest, but I thought it was pretty good. Lots of like rice, fruit, seafood. The best mangoes that I've had were in the Philippines. Lots of pork on the menu too. I love pork. It wasn't maybe as nice as, say, Thai food, but it was still pretty good. I didn't have any issues with the food in the Philippines. And one thing that I liked is that carbonara was on the menu like all over the place. You don't really see carbonara on the menus in Canada, from what I've seen, but all over the place in the Philippines you can find carbonara, and it's quite delicious. One of those weird quirks that I've noticed there. And one last kind of weird point is that sometimes you'll buy like a soft drink, like a Coke or a Pepsi, and it'll get served to you in a plastic like Ziploc bag. I'm assuming it's because they keep the bottle, but I found that was kind of weird, but in a quirky way as well. And the next point, and one that I don't like about the country, is the sex tourism aspect of it. You could legit see like an 85-year-old man with like a 16-year-old girlfriend, and that's like kind of common. And I hate seeing that, but it's definitely out there. And it can be a bit annoying at times too. Like it could be like 11 o'clock in the morning. I could be going to a 7-Eleven to get a bottle of water. And on the way there, you could be getting catcalled by, like working girls, massage, 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 like 5 to 10 times, just kind of crossing a few blocks to get a bottle of water, depending on where you're at in Manila. More common in like the touristy areas, but it's definitely in your face. And one thing I didn't like about the country. Is the Philippines a safe country to visit? And on my first trip, I spent about 6 months living in Manila, and I went literally everywhere. Late at night, could be the LRT, the MRT, I walked around. I went all over the city. I didn't have any issues whatsoever. There is safety in numbers in Manila. There's just a huge number of people, and if you got yourself into trouble, I'm sure there'd be tons of people that would help you out. But again, the people are very nice. They're very accommodating. I didn't have any issues at all. There was maybe one time where it was late at night, and I think it was by the casino, and there were a bunch of homeless children who were kind of jumping on me. They were kind of like, I was walking like this, and they were hanging off my legs. I think they were more excited to see like a foreigner than they were trying to rob me. So that was the only issue that I saw when I was there. Again, pickpocketing might be a thing. Never happened to me, but it's such a huge populated country, and I'm sure in certain areas you got to be careful if you're walking through like very busy areas. I would say dealing with cab drivers can be a bit annoying, like anywhere else in the world. Some will try to rip you off, but most of them are actually pretty good people. They'll use the meter and help you out. And two last points on security, which I found kind of interesting, in that there's tons of banks and 7-Elevens, and most of them will have a guard out front with a shotgun. There are just tons of guns around Manila, which I've just found kind of interesting. And the last point here on security or safety is that when you go into like a shopping center, it's quite common to have to go through a metal detector, and there'll be guards that will check your belongings as well. So it's kind of interesting, one of those weird quirks about the country. Well, there you go. That's my take on my first impressions of Manila. Now, the big question, is Manila worth visiting? I think so. It's a big, chaotic, populated city. It's a lot of fun. It's not a city like Bangkok where there's tons of tourist sites. I think Manila is more of like a destination and an experience, but it's definitely worth visiting. I think Manila is kind of a place that you endure to get to paradise, like in the provinces. Tons of great places to visit in the country, and Manila is generally the first or the last stop on the way to those destinations. Definitely worth visiting. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.